second day. I will just introduce briefly the moderator of this panel, who will then proceed to introduce panelists. Arvydas Krishnas this year is a Fulbright Fellow here at Yale University. He's a researcher also at Kaunas University of Technology. He's the author of the book Politics with a Human Face, Identity and Experience in Post-Soviet Europe. And in this book, he examines identity formation, symbolism, historical narratives, political images, and other human factors and how they shape politics in the parts of the world that we've been discussing today. Lithuania, of course, but also Ukraine, Russia, and the rest of post-Soviet region. Here at Yale this year, he's working on his second book, exploring the challenges of the current technological, political, and intellectual developments present to the from the present to the Enlightenment processes of truth and meaning, are playing role in contemporary politics, as well as in the threat of war. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second panel today. Right after this panel, I have to say we will have a concluding panel, so we'll skip the break. But we should have lunch afterwards, so we should be fine. We'll survive. And as for this panel, we'll talk about Vilnius as a space of education, a place of education. Unfortunately, we miss one panelist that was supposed to be here and was supposed to tell us about the central figure of education, or central institution of education to Vilnius, the Vilnius University, and the rector, Rimvydas Petrauskas, unfortunately could not be with us today, but actually we'll try to make it work for our advantage, because as Michel Foucault said, if you want to understand a phenomenon, you need to look at its sort of horizons, margins, borders. Where does it stretch? Where does it end? And so that way you can understand better the discourse of phenomenon at hand. And in this regard, we're very lucky because we have three wonderful panelists who will enlighten us on different dimensions of the topic or intersection of space, the city of Vilnius, and education. We'll start with Professor Cecile Kuznits of Bard College, New York, who's a historian and a scholar of Jewish studies, who's lectured in many places, Harvard, Maryland, Washington, Pennsylvania, Vilnius, and others, as well as the Ivo Institute for Jewish Research, which was actually established in Vilnius and Berlin, if I understand correctly. And she'll give us a perspective of the Jewish tradition of education in Vilnius, and this sort of open up a historical horizon for us. Second, we will have Professor Krzysztof Rybinski, who is a prominent economist, publicist, advisor, educator, and he's worked in private sector as well as in public and education. He's taught in Warsaw School of Economics, was a rector of Vistula Academy of Finance, Kazakh Economic University, and is currently the rector of European Humanities University in Vilnius. So we'll have this more of a, let's say, sociological view, horizontal view of the Belarusian sort of impulse of educational tradition in Vilnius. And then we'll have a glimpse to the future, and we'll have Una Kaunaitė, who is a young, talented, prominent, and award-winning writer, but also an education policy specialist and expert, and she is the head and the director of EDU Vilnius, which is a center for improving education in Vilnius, because Vilnius has recently won this prestigious Bloomberg Cities grant to develop Vilnius as a space of education. So we'll hear more about that. So three fascinating glimpses into our panoramas of Vilnius and education. So, but first of all, we'll start with history, and Cecile, I'll pass the mic
Okay,
to you.
thank you. Let's see, can I, you think I should put this here?
I think if you can just pull it closer to you afterwards, yeah.
Okay. How is the sound? Is this
Perfect.
good?
Perfect.
Okay. So yes, I'll add my thanks for the introduction and to the organizers for the opportunity to be here. It's been a busy and enlightening 2 days, and I'm pleased to be here on this panel. As Dr. Grisian has indicated, I'm a historian, so I'm a Jewish historian, so I'll be giving more of historical overview from a perspective of Jewish culture, and then we will see where we can tie this into the other presentation. So I guess I'll start my screen share now. Yes, okay, screen share.
Yes, yes.
Okay. What is that? Okay, are we good? Yes, okay. All right. So it's already been mentioned in various talks around the diversity and the historically multicultural nature of Vilnius as a city, but also that there's two groups for whom the city has been a capital, either a kind of symbolic capital or an actual political capital. And those are, of course, the Lithuanians and the Jews. Jews historically comprised between 1/3 and 40% of the population, at times even more. And as has already been mentioned, the city is sometimes referred to as the Jerusalem of Lithuania, or the capital of Yiddish land, a term that I'll come back to. So part of what I want to try to address today is how the city that Jews traditionally refer to as Vilna comes to loom so large in Jewish history. It's not one of the largest Jewish communities of the region. There are many much larger Jewish communities. It's also not the oldest in the region of Lithuania, writ large. But I think one thing that we see is that precisely because of the traditionally diverse nature of the population, that the city has been a place of many faiths, languages, cultures, etc., that Jews as a minority group historically felt less pressure to assimilate into any one particular culture, since there historically was such a diversity, and that gave minority groups such as the Jewish population a chance to feel the right to maintain their own languages and culture as part of a diverse environment. So the Jewish community in the city dates back to the late 15th century. There's a permanent established Jewish community by the early 16th century, and historically the center of this community is the synagogue courtyard, what's called in Yiddish the Schulhof. That's dominated by this building that you see in this reproduction of a watercolor. I believe it's a watercolor originally, the Great Synagogue. This was traditionally the heart of Jewish religious life and traditional Jewish religious study in the city. But in addition to this prominent building of the Great Synagogue, the Schulhof also housed dozens of other small rooms for prayer and study that were called kloisen. And it was said that around the clock you could find Jews praying and studying traditional religious texts in any of these locations. And since yesterday we had an interesting discussion about material culture and cultural heritage of various religious traditions in the city. Some of you, I'm sure, know that the site of the Great Synagogue and the synagogue courtyard, which was damaged during the Nazi occupation and then really bulldozed by the Soviets, has recently been excavated. It's in the heart of the old town, And the remains of the Great Synagogue have been uncovered, and there's now a debate, a discussion about what to do with the site, which I think is an interesting case study of cultural heritage and how you know, how this site can be commemorated. So one of the great figures associated with the city of Vilna is this scholar and rabbi who's known as the Gaon of Vilna, or the genius of Vilna. And he was not only a prominent scholar, but he was also known for developing a distinct kind of approach in the Jewish intellectual tradition that stressed rationalism and meticulous attention to the details of Jewish legal texts that are kind of the heart of the rabbinic tradition. And this rationalist approach contrasted with the contemporaneous movement of Hasidism that began at about the same time that the Gaon was active, and he led the opposition to the Hasidic movement, which is a mystical movement based on charismatic religious leadership, and that stresses emotion and sort of physical pleasure, eating and drinking as means to kind of achieving spiritual ends. And in contrast, the Gaon stressed the kind of rationalist approach, which gave rise eventually to the stereotype of the Litvak, the Lithuanian Jew, as someone who's very serious and rational, and doesn't really enjoy life, which is something of a stereotype. But this kind of approach based in rationalism becomes associated with the Gaon and with the city of Vilna. And the city develops an array of famous yeshivas, academies for higher traditional religious education that become renowned in the city. And also the city is famous as a center of Jewish publishing, so that the Rome printing press, which is established there in 1835, prints many classic works of Jewish literature in Hebrew and in Yiddish, and the edition of the Talmud that's produced there becomes the standard up until the present day, the kind of standard Talmud that Jews around the world engaged in traditional religious study can consult what's referred to as the Vilna Shas, the Vilna edition of the Talmud. And the page numbering in this edition is the standard page numbering for Jews around the world till this day. And it's still a standard, as you can see, you can purchase a copy, it will set you back a few $100s, but this is still the kind of the standard edition of the key reference work of the Jewish intellectual tradition in its traditional form. But Vilna also becomes a center of new modern movements that develop in the course of the Enlightenment. So the Jewish Enlightenment movement, referred to as the Haskalah, flourishes in Vilna. And it's been argued that this rationalist tradition that I referred to, this opposition to mysticism and this emphasis on rationalism that the Gaon embodied, also meant that this tradition was more open to secular fields of study, like the natural sciences, for example, so that this transition from a traditional religious way of life to a more modern way of life that was more open to the surrounding cultures and more open to broader fields of study, including eventually literature, philosophy, foreign languages, along with natural sciences, that this process of modernization and broadening of educational horizons took place more smoothly in Vilna and in the surrounding region because of this legacy of rationalist thought that was more open to secular subjects. So over the course of the 19th century, this movement leaves its mark on the city, not only in publishing with works by the Rom Press that I mentioned, but the one remaining synagogue in the city today, the Choir Synagogue, is founded in 1847 by adherents of this movement, the Haskalah. This was a more moderately reformed style of prayer and synagogue service. In the same year, 1847, the Russian Empire, the Russian authorities established 2 rabbinical seminaries to train rabbis with a more modern orientation and knowledge of Russian, and one of the 2 rabbinical seminaries are established in Vilna. And then one of the famous sons of the city, Matisyahu Strashun, amasses a famous collection of rabbinic books that he then donates to the city, and a special library is constructed in the synagogue courtyard adjacent to the Great Synagogue to house the Strashun Library, which is famous not only for its works of traditional rabbinic literature, but also eventually as a place where not only traditionally religious Jews, but secular scholars and students come to consult works of modern Jewish literature, to consult the press. And so right up until the Second World War, it's a place where all elements of Vilna Jewish society come together to study and read and gain access to all kinds of reading material. And the surviving parts, I'll just mention the surviving parts of the Strashun collection are eventually transferred to YIVO in the aftermath of the Second World War and are now housed at YIVO in New York. So moving along, and it's trying to take a kind of broad overview, by the late 19th century, modern Jewish political movements have been founded, and Vilna also becomes the center of the Zionist movement. The Jewish Labor Bund, which is a socialist Jewish political party that supports culture in Yiddish, the spoken Jewish vernacular language, is founded in the city in 1897. So as modern movements develop, Vilna in turn becomes a center of many of these movements, and this really culminates in the period after the First World War, when there's a real flourishing of Jewish culture, and particularly culture in Yiddish. So that Yiddish was traditionally looked down upon as a spoken language, but it didn't have the prestige of Hebrew, the holy language of the Bible and traditional religious texts. As I said, during the Haskalah, there was a movement for Jews to learn non-Jewish languages like Russian, Polish, Lithuanian, was less on the radar in that period, in the early Haskalah period. And this also takes on a new kind of political dimension in the wake of the First World War, when the principle of self-determination for national groups kind of comes to the front. And as I'm sure you know, the city of Vilna is contested between Poland and Lithuania. And in this setting, Jews as a minority group without a government, without a state, unite, at least some of them. There's one trend in Jewish life to unite behind Yiddish as the national language of the Jewish people, and to promote a culture in Yiddish as a way of asserting the rights of Jews as a national minority group among the panoply of national groups in the area. So in the 1920s and 30s, this culture really reaches a high point of flourishing in various languages, but particularly in Yiddish. So the Kletzkin Verlag is established in Vilna, publishes classics of modern Yiddish literature. Let's see, the literary group Young Vilna is active in the city with several world-renowned writers like the poet Abram Sutzkever and the poet and later novelist Chaim Brada. This is a plaque that was affixed in the contemporary Vilnius to mark the site where some meetings of this literary group took place. The Vilna troupe becomes world famous, particularly for its productions of the classic Yiddish play The Dybbuk. So it travels around the world, becomes renowned around the world under the name of the Vilna troupe. And for our purposes, in particular, I want to mention the Jewish school networks that developed in this period throughout the whole region, but particularly in Vilna, there were competing networks of Jewish schools, some religious in orientation, some secular in orientation, some teaching in Hebrew, some in Polish, some in Yiddish, some in combinations of those languages. And while these schools existed throughout the region, the Yiddish schools in particular found their fullest development in Vilna. So the Jewish community of Warsaw at this time was about 5 times as large. There are about 300,000 Jews in Warsaw versus 60,000 in Vilna, but there were more students enrolled in the Yiddish schools in Vilna than in Warsaw. And these schools ranged from kindergartens to high schools, like the Vilna, the so-called Real Gymnasia, which was renowned for its rigorous academic program, to teacher seminary to train future teachers for the Yiddish schools. This is a brochure showing the buildings on the outskirts of Vilna on Subachius God on the outskirts. I hope I pronounced that right. Which still stand today, which were originally constructed as housing for poor Jews, as kind of charitable housing, and went on to house a number of different Jewish institutions, including a dormitory for students. So there were vocational schools, there were schools for students with disabilities, all conducted in the Yiddish language. And the kind of crown of this educational network in many ways was the YIVO Institute, as it's called today in English, the Yiddische Wissenschaftliche Institute or Yiddish Scientific Institute, as its name is in Yiddish, which Jonathan Brent spoke about yesterday. This was an institute founded in 1925 as the first center for scholarship in the Yiddish language and about Yiddish and about the history and culture of East European Jewry primarily. I don't have time to speak in depth about YIVO's work. I wrote a book on this so I could speak in much more depth, but it had 4 research sections for philology, history, economic statistics, psychology, and pedagogy. It had a division in the 1930s for youth research that sponsored several essay contests, asking young people to write about their experiences as adolescents. And Jonathan Brent spoke yesterday about one of these autobiographies that was recently recovered, but this is one among hundreds of entries that were submitted and that really created an unparalleled resource for seeing the challenges and experiences of young people in the 1930s. And of course, YIVO amassed a library and an archive, the fate of which Jonathan spoke about yesterday. So, so YIVO had many goals as an institute, including raising the prestige of the Yiddish language, forging a connection to masses of East European Yiddish-speaking Jews and Yiddish-speaking Jews around the world. But what I want to just emphasize for a moment here is the role of YIVO as a center for Jews who had no government of their own, no state of their own, and who were widely dispersed not only across Eastern Europe, but also in emigre communities around the world, in North America, in South Africa, in Palestine, in Australia, and in many parts of the world. And since this community had no central point, Vilna in many ways became a kind of symbolic capital, a symbolic center for Yiddish-speaking Jews. And YIVO saw itself as an institution that would serve as a national library, a national university, a national language academy, a central meeting point for scholars and students, and in a way became a kind of symbolic capital. So YIVO founders originally imagined their headquarters would be in Berlin, which of course was had a large Jewish community and was known as a center of scholarship. But when the plan was formulated, it was actually the activists in these secular Yiddish schools in Vilna that responded most enthusiastically to the plan, and they saw their work as in pedagogy for students up through let's say the high school level, being complemented by YIVO's work as a kind of Yiddish university and a place that would help train teachers and produce materials that would help the school movement. And at the same time, YIVO relied on the support of the schools, the students in the schools, and the teachers, because they saw them as the future of their work, right? That the schools would train students that they believed would grow up and then participate in their work and support their work. So, so in this way, YIVO came to be described as the crown of the building of secular Jewish culture and secular Yiddish culture in particular. Now, if anyone has any images of Jewish life in Vilna, it's probably associated with the Jewish quarter in the Old Town, the narrow winding streets with these arches, which is on the cover of virtually every book about Jewish life in Vilna, except for mine. Okay, and you can see here, right? And there's good reason why this image becomes a kind of icon of Jewish life in the city. And I could say more about that on a, if we had more time. But what I want to just stress here is that institutions like YIVO were located not in the Jewish quarter, not in the synagogue courtyard or immediately adjacent, but rather in newer parts of the city. This was where one of YIVO's founders, its most important scholar, Max Weinreich, lived, and these were the first offices, the location of the first offices of YIVO in the city. And then when YIVO constructed its own headquarters building in the city, which Jonathan Brent showed a photograph of yesterday. This is a painting that emphasizes the way it was surrounded by greenery and open space because it was in a newer part of the city that was still lightly developed, was just being laid out, had been laid out with broad, straight streets. And this presented a very deliberate contrast to the Jewish quarter, which is with its narrow streets, which was quite dilapidated and overcrowded by the interwar period. And so this really reinforced the image of YIVO and by extension of these Yiddish educational institutions in the city as modern and dynamic and forward-looking. And one of the notable features of the building was on the first floor landing. As one went in, there was a map of the world on the in the stairwell, which you can see in this photo. And this had pins on the map indicating all the locations around the world where YIVO was active, and the largest pin was for the YIVO headquarters in Vilna. So this presented an image of Yiddish culture and Jewish education, let's say, as a worldwide enterprise for people living in diaspora around the world, but also with its center in Vilna. So as a speaker at YIVO's World Convention in 1935 put it, Yiddish itself is recognized as a territory, an anarchic republic with its capital in Vilna. YIVO is the scholarly academy of the territory Yiddish. And you can see this is part of the permanent exhibit at the Polin Museum in Warsaw. So just to sort of sum up in a few more minutes, so one of the paradoxes of this flourishing of educational and cultural life that I've described is that, of course, it was a very poor community, like most communities in the region in this period, in the interwar period. Most Jews were quite impoverished. And this cultural flourishing took place in spite of this poverty. So there's a rabbinic saying, ein kemach, ein Torah, which in Hebrew, which means if there's no flour, in other words, if there's no bread to eat, there's no Torah, there's no learning. One writer wrote an article about Jewish life in Vilna in the 1930s, and he entitled it Ein Kemach Yesh Torah. There's no bread to eat, but there is Torah, there is learning. So a kind of further paradox is that many people wrote that that this kind of cultural flourishing, despite poverty, could only happen in Vilna. One reason for that was this heritage of Jewish education and scholarship dating back centuries, going back to the figure of the Gaon, where there was that his more rationalist, more open approach to scholarship and education, it's been argued, led to a kind of continuity between the traditional religious scholarship in Vilna's famous yeshivas and study rooms, to the modern scholarship of the Yiddish school system. And also that this legacy meant that Jewish culture in Vilna was more open to the surrounding culture. So that in the Real Gymnasia, the Yiddish language high school, students study Jewish authors, but they also put on plays by Shakespeare and Oscar Wilde in Yiddish translation. So this vision of a culture that is both deeply rooted in Jewish tradition and traditional Jewish scholarship, but also open to the surrounding cultures and very much part of Europe. I would say is part of the, if we had to talk about contemporary legacies, I'd say that for Jews, this is the kind of the legacy of Jewish culture in Vilna, this vision of a culture that is both deeply rooted in Jewish tradition, but also open to influences from the wider world. And if I would, and if I had to just nod to a kind of legacy from the perspective of the majority population, in this case, contemporary Lithuania, as the city is part of contemporary Lithuania, today's Vilnius, it's, that this diversity, the historical diversity of the city that's been discussed throughout these 2 days, that when that diversity has been embraced, as we saw in the last panel, when the city has welcomed people from diverse backgrounds and made that part of the city's own legacy, that has ultimately what has led to its stature that, as somebody said, it punches above its weight, right? For a small city, it leaves it's left a large historical imprint. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I have a question.
We'll have time for questions after all.
All right, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I,
And now we'll look forward to hear from Professor Rybinski. He's also going to use a PowerPoint. Yes, we're good to go.
Thank you so much for inviting me. We're very privileged to be part of the panel. So I'm really happy to be here, especially at Yale, which is a great place. I've never been before. And I'm going to offer a perspective on Vilnius as a place of education coming from European Humanities University, which is a university of the third year of history, founded in 1992 in Minsk, the only university in Belarus that offered education based on democratic values, which Lukashenko didn't like, and based on his personal decision, closed the university in 2004. And Vilnius offered a helpful hand in the Lithuanian government, and the university could move to Vilnius and start working again in 2005. Since then, received generous support of Lithuanian government. We have a beautiful building in the old town. You can see for free. We have financial support every year from the Lithuanian government, and actually we are able to survive because of generous funding that's coming from the European Union. The governments of many countries, mostly from Northern Europe and from the United States recently. So we are home for 1,500 students, growing very fast. 2020 shock in Belarus helped to grow because many students want to study in normal university, and Vilnius and EHU provide this environment. So we doubled in size in just 2 years, from 750 students to 1,500. We'll be celebrating 20 years in exile in Vilnius next year with a huge conference in June that we try to bring together all universities in exile from the world, including, of course, the New School of New York, as the first one ever in exile, but also others, American University of Einstein. So we'll have a big conference and try to understand what it means to be in exile in Vilnius, which is a very particular place to have it. We talked yesterday about that formal education in Lithuania is not conducive to prevailing of the multilingual landscape of Vilnius. And then you imagine EHU has 4 official languages, which is Lithuanian, Belarusian, Russian, and English. And I'm from Poland, so when I walk on the corridors, quite often I meet people who speak to me in Polish. So we use 5 languages at EHU, which is probably quite enrichment to the traditional Vilnius of being multilingual, multicultural society. Our mission is also distinct, which on top of being a centered, high-quality institution, we strive to build civil society in Belarus and in the region. So that makes us truly unique. So this is about the EHU, a brief introduction, who we are and the rich Belarusian tradition. So when I thought about what could I offer to you, I joined the EHU as a rector in April, so I don't have institutional memory of being in Vilnius, although my family, mother's side comes from Vilnius hundreds of years back. So I feel like home in Vilnius for a Pole. But I thought maybe when I look at Vilnius in the rankings and across many dimensions, it's a unique place. You can see it's top 3, any dimension you look through, it's top 3, in terms of overall economic potential, business friendliness, human capital, and lifestyle. I thought, let's look into the education landscape. And there hadn't been a measure or a ranking that would measure the role of Vilnius in terms of education. So I thought, how about asking the biggest migrant community what they think about Vilnius? So what I have done is I tried to put together a draft paper, which I kindly ask Maximus to, we have some summary and then maybe a longer version that will be distributed if you want to take a look later. So what we have done is to run a survey, which is was done just a few weeks ago, so it's pretty new and fresh. So it's very draft results. So we asked the entire community of EHU, so students, staff, faculty, to answer several questions about Vilnius as a place for life, living, education, and work. And when you look at the survey, its respondents of the survey closely match the demographics of our community at EHU within Vilnius University. So it is representative. So I'll be speaking now. Don't look at me as a Krzysztof, rector of EHU. This is a voice of 1,500 people, speaking about what they think about Vilnius, how they feel about Vilnius. This is the first time such survey about Vilnius has been done among the migrant community, and especially among those who live, who are students and who work in the university. So there are several questions that this survey should help to answer. One was we asked about the living experience in Vilnius, and we would investigate what factors affect the living experience. So what is important for people to report they're very satisfied or not satisfied with Vilnius as a place for living? Are there any differences between nationalities? We have 80% of students from Belarus, but there's 10% from Russia, 5% from Ukraine, and other 5% from 10 other countries. So I would focus on also we have Lithuanian students from Lithuania and staff and faculty from Lithuania. So we have respondents from Lithuania, from Belarus, and from other nationalities in this survey to see whether there are differences in perception what it is about Vilnius. We look briefly about the EHU history, present, and future in Vilnius. There are some questions there, quite interesting perspective. And then also we look into some questions that were discussed today about what it is between Vilnius and Belarus and Belarusians today. What is the perception, including the historical perception, because we are Belarusian University in exile. This is very valid question. So I'm an economist. I feel like a black sheep about historians, but that's what we do in economics: charts and regressions. So let me explain. This is to show the survey on one chart. So this is a scale from 1 to 10. So people were asked to describe that they are satisfied or not with certain aspect of Vilnius. So on the top you have overall rating, and then other categories. And here you have Belarusian, Lithuanian, other, and here you would have faculty, staff and students. The black line will be the median response. And this will be the 50% of the middle of the responses, so the most typical ones. And the rest is just the rest of the distribution, and the black dot will be the outliers. These responses happen outside the main responses, but sometimes this is reported. So we had overall rating. We had are you satisfied with housing, transport, culture, environment, community assets that you can mobilize for the well-being of inhabitants, natural resources, and also there were questions about the quality of interactions between people in Vilnius, the multicultural environment. Have you faced acts of discrimination? So plus 10 will be no discrimination. 1 would be I did face personally or witnessed discrimination. Would be the safety, quality of shopping and eating. So these are the variables, quantitative variables later used to determine what affects the perception of living in Vilnius. So I will not dwell into the details here. It's just very first draft of the paper, but what you can see is that almost all responses are very high. So the median would be around 9 or 8. So in general, with just one exception, our academic community is very satisfied with living in Vilnius. There are 2 aspects which are especially positive. One is the cultural landscape that is assessed as extremely favorable, and people are extremely happy with the quality and number of events that are taking place in Vilnius. And second is, and it's no surprise to anyone who's been to Vilnius, is the nature. So natural parks and outdoor leisure resources that are available to the citizens. So these are the highest ranked assets of Vilnius. The lowest responses, and in the case of other nationalities, was even below 5. So there will be most Ukrainian and Russian members of our EAG community would rank it below 5 with housing. So housing in general is considered quite expensive, not accessible in Vilnius. So this is the only aspect in this very positive survey that comes out in some cases below 5, which is the middle range from 1 to 10 that was assessed. There are some differences between nationalities. So I would say maybe students feel a bit less positive than the faculty and staff of our university. That probably is related to high prices of housing mostly. In terms of experiences, I would say in terms of interactions, multicultural environment, discrimination, there are high ratings. There were some cases that relates back to our discussion before of people who faced some discrimination when they spoke Russian. So that is also confirmed in this survey. But there are this is here. There are some outliers. So both in terms of Belarusian students and Russian and Ukrainian, very few people, but there are some cases. But in general, this is a very high score of about 7.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. So putting all these factors together, this is the regression equation. So we try to understand people who feel very happy about living in Vilnius. What are the factors that affect their opinion? So when you look at the stars and dots here, it means statistical significance, which means that the factors which are here are important. So this is just the first class. I just ran it a few days ago. So what matters is the quality of transport. But maybe the most important in terms of the value would be the quality of cultural life, which is highly important for people who are satisfied with the life in Vilnius. Community assets are not important. Nature becomes also very important. So culture and nature, 2 factors which affect opinion about being in Vilnius. These are very strong assets of the city. Then if you go down, it is reasonable quality and pricing of shopping and eating. And then highly important is the quality of interactions between the people who live in Vilnius, multicultural environment, and multi-language environment. So this comes significant. Among the controls that we have, you would see that because you have Belarusian, other and Lithuanian nationalities, you would have that our community members who come from Belarus are a little bit less satisfied than the others from living in Vilnius, and that's mostly students. And then if you look at other controls, gender doesn't matter. But in terms of satisfaction from living in Vilnius, our faculty members are on average about more than half point more satisfied than other members of the community. So there's a quick look into the first question, the factors that affect the opinion about the quality of life in Vilnius. And the second question was EHU and Vilnius. So we asked the question why Vilnius was selected as a destination for the EHU. It was closed in 2004 by Lukashenko himself. And what are the responses? So these are the choices. The blue one, the last one is I don't know the idea. So this is this one. But you will see that Vilnius as a unique place dominates the responses. Because it says foreign government decided it's a unique place, special relations between societies in Lithuania, or government support, which did happen, but especially among Lithuanians, but also among others, the Vilnius as a unique place is the dominant factor in this response, which I find quite interesting. Today, we ask the question: how is EHU as university-in-exile seen in Vilnius? And you can see that as answers are spread across three categories. So among Ukrainian and Russian respondents and Belarusian, you will see that the dominating one slightly is the important part of higher education sector in Vilnius, but also there's high percentage saying not visible, and about the same or slightly less a typical university. So there's no clear, strong view how it is seen among nationalities, but there's difference among the roles of the university. So clearly faculty themselves believe that EHU has become an important part of the higher education in Vilnius. So proud of what they do with the research and teaching. So it's clear that in the case of faculty, it's the dominant answer in this case. The future was even more interesting because we asked, what will happen if one day, and we hope it will happen, what should happen to EHU when democratic Belarus becomes a democratic country and the regime goes away. And you'll see this is there's basically one answer. If that happens, it's either that we should remain in Vilnius or we should open second campus in Minsk. That's the answer. So very few people would say, and it's across nationalities, would say that the university should go back to Minsk. So there is something unique about Vilnius that says that the university should remain an important part of the higher education landscape in Vilnius after it becomes possible to go back to its roots, to its home city of the first home city of Minsk, which now the second home city is Vilnius. So we will stay.
Very nice.
Second, the third question was how Vilnius relates to the Belarusian identity. And this is, I'm reporting only the Belarusian part of our community, so the non-Lithuanian or Russian or Ukrainian voice, because it's about Belarusian identity. As you can see, being in exile in Vilnius is seen by vast majority of respondents who are Belarusians as a place that strengthens the sense of their own identity, which I think it's a very strong message that this is the place where they feel they can continue to work towards strengthening of the community in exile that faces many challenges but finds a very welcome home in, as you can see, in Vilnius, which is great. We also asked this question, which was discussed today about the Litvinism. That's now surfaces in some political circles and in some technical historians. But we also asked the question: how much do you know about the links between Vilnius and Belarus, the shared history? And again, as you can see across nationalities, it is the Belarusian respondents that are saying, yes, I know this link very, very well. It's somewhat less important or less often stated by Lithuanian colleagues who participated in the survey. So it seems that this common history finds its awareness in the minds of Belarusians much more than for Russian, Ukrainian, or Lithuanian members of our community. I'm from Poland, so when I talk to my landlord in English, he's under 40. But he, when he talks someday, he talked to me in English that tutejsi. So tutejsi is a Polish word. No, it's not a Polish word. It's a word we use in Vilnius. So what is tutejsi? And it's people who speak many languages, and that's what he explained to me. And they borrow from many traditions. Today, in the form I learned, there are people who don't feel very strongly connected to any nationality. They don't know much about the cultural context of this word. What I found is that Vilnius is unbelievably unique language environment. So when I come to a store, I would usually say I speak English, ja говорю по-русски, mówię po polsku, and then about a third of the time I get English response, a Polish response, and Russian response. So I get to talk to people in the store in all three languages. I don't speak Russian, I understand, but I don't speak. So this environment is really unique. You don't find it often anywhere else. And I asked the question: does it matter for your quality of life in Vilnius? And the responses were, again, you can see across nationalities. The response that was dominating was it's a unique place in the region. And interestingly, most so among Russian and Ukrainian speakers, nationalities, maybe because they find that the Russian language is also commonly understood in Vilnius, which has there are some questions related to it as we discussed in the previous panel. But clearly, it's seen as a unique multilingual place. And the last bit of data is all right. So you will graduate, we'd like to work here, okay? And this is our student response. So the question was, are you looking for a job in Vilnius? 10, yes, I'm actively looking, 1, not at all. And you can see that the percentage, I'm recalculating the percentages, students would be actively looking into Vilnius job market as a preferred place of work, which of course would require learning Lithuanian. So it's more than half. Faculty are already responding, no, I don't, I'm looking for a job. I do have a job, so it's good news for me. I don't look for a job, but for staff, that's good message for the rector, because I learned that maybe 45% of our staff may be looking for a job, but in Vilnius, so not other place. So it's a great place to study, great and desired, and the first choice of place to work for students. So great message. So just key takeaways, just briefly repeating. Across all categories that we checked, Vilnius scores very high among migrant education community that is multinational, is European Humanities University community, in the range of 8 to 9. With one exception, housing market is pricey and seen as not affordable, not accessible. Two key assets that Vilnius has is its cultural landscape and its nature. It clearly shows at the very top in these rankings. So I'm going to not repeat this regression analysis. We talked about it. So there are factors which are really important in forming opinion about living in Vilnius. And Vilnius is seen as a unique, multilingual, multicultural place in Central Eastern Europe that's amplified the comprehension and embodiment of Belarus identity, stands out as a favorite work destination for nearly 60% of our students surveyed. And this is important message also to our governing board and owners, that over 90% of survey participants believe that even the establishment of legitimate democratic government in Belarus, EHU should maintain its presence in unique place, which is Vilnius. So that is the message from the survey.
Thank you very much. I think we can continue straight away with and we'll save some time for questions after our presentation.
No,
will take it to my hands. So I'm happy we started talking a little bit about current events and the future, so there's not so much odd one out. So I'll start by saying, and I was very glad that this morning on the walk here, I received this question already. So I realized we definitely, when we talk about education, and this time I'm starting talking about the general education or K-12, if we're talking about USA education structure, we rarely talk about municipalities, at least in terms of the context of Lithuania. We usually talk about the national level because the curriculum is set by the ministry. If we talk about municipalities or cities, at the best, we will talk about buildings, infrastructure, something leaking, and something that needs to be fixed. So I hope that during my presentation, I can change this thought, because I would ask, why not talk about municipalities and why this couldn't be a place for education as well. So when I heard the name of our talk, I was very happy because I even found two ways of how I interpret Vilnius as a place for education, and I will try to present both of them. But I will start from answering the question that I received since I came here. So what is Edu Vilnius, which is Education Vilnius in short? And that's education agency of Vilnius municipality, which is basically responsible for improving quality of education in Vilnius. I also sometimes get the question, so what are we good at if we don't build buildings, we don't let children into the schools by registration system, we don't fix leaking pipes. We work with people, we work with human resources inside schools, and I believe that's the most important thing in order to reach better education. We try to, I won't go about everything we do because it would take much longer than 20 minutes, but we try to go into 6 different groups of projects that we run. So we work with leadership of schools. That includes principals or vice principals. We provide mentorship for new principals. We have the network of vice principals, which is quite unique in terms of what I've seen in Lithuania and even in the world, because we see vice principals as those who are actually running the schools quite often. We also provide networks for the principals themselves, and we prepare new principals with university programs. We also work a lot with teachers because teacher shortage is one of the biggest, or I would argue the biggest problem in Lithuania and in many countries around the world. So we attract new teachers, we have different programs to do that. I'll talk about funding the studies and try to work with the people that are the most important inside the schools. We run different innovation programs, different programs to how we say transition schools in terms of change how the actual system inside the school works, so working with administration more. We also have projects for opening the Vilnius, which I will definitely talk more about, and we also work with data and analysis because that's also very important in order to be able to improve. So I will provide now a few examples. There's going to be like maybe a quarter of what we do. As an example, what municipality themselves starts to do. So for example, because I said that we're lacking teachers, in Lithuania by the law, principals can admit people who don't have a pedagogical degree, but they see that this person has a potential to be a teacher, to become a teacher, but they have to, in 2 years' time, receive proper qualification. So what Edu Vilnius does, we fund studies for these teachers, and sometimes we legalize the teachers who work inside the schools, and just within 1 year we are now financing 300 people, which is a lot even on national level in terms of Lithuanian numbers, and that's just 1 year numbers because we understand how important it is. So that's Vilnius municipality decision. Another thing that at first started as a very small thing, but we started to receive even international interest in how you show meaning of teachers. So we have International Teachers Day, and we thought 3 years ago that it would be very nice to celebrate the whole week. And how to celebrate it, and that's how you invite the city to join in. We invited institutions inside Vilnius to show that they care about the teachers and to give some kind of free things for the teachers or discounts or anything they want to. And by that, we received free gyms for teachers the whole week, or we invited cinema and they provided discounts. And so teachers for the whole week go to free cinema or theater. We provided concerts, conferences, and so on. So basically the whole week, teachers have their own card because as well, teachers in Vilnius have free transportation. So they move through all the buses but we have buses mainly and trolley buses. They have their own free transportation card, which is also quite unique. And that was a decision by Vilnius. Moving more to subject matters, for example, Vilnius decided to change how technologies are taught. Again, we usually have technologies that are about sewing or wood or preparing food inside. It's been changing, but one of the things that has been decided about 4 years ago to introduce Fab Labs. And Fab Labs are modern technology laboratories with 3D printers, laser cutters, robotics, and different kind of like electronics more, I would say, different kind of modern technologies. So we already have 36 Fab Labs established inside mostly progymnasiums inside the schools. And what we also do every single year, we train teachers how to work in them. Because if you're a teacher, you're probably quite scared to touch a 3D printer because you might break it, right? So the most important part there is to actually teach them not to be afraid to touch those things that are there. We also establish like STEAM labs and so on, but this is more common probably. So I'm trying to go with things that are very unique in Vilnius, or mostly unique. You probably have heard about participatory budgeting. That is, municipalities around the world offer a certain amount of money for residents to think of how to get involved inside city matters. So we are trying out that in schools as well, that we provide certain amount of money for first year, and then second year we give less, but then ask school to also add their own money for students themselves to decide what they want to do inside a school in order to feel part of the school. Last year, we tried that with 12 schools. They all loved it. We heard fascinating stories, even from, some students bribing other students to vote for their ideas and so on, because that's democracy, right? You learn the hard way. If you're going to vote for the wrong idea, it's your own choice, right? And that's a good way of learning. But also, students deciding that they want some interesting things inside their schools. They want places to sit down, to relax. They want games inside corners of the school, not to sit around their screens and so on. So this year we hope to have 20 schools. We already have 32 schools. And I hope in 3-4 years, we're gonna have all of the schools in Vilnius having a certain amount of money for students themselves to decide. 3 years ago, Vilnius decided to teach all primary teachers IT, because that was not part of primary curriculum. And so for 3 years now, all of the primary school teachers have trainings with a company that actually last year won the best digital education award in World Summit Awards. So very, very nice startup from Lithuania. And they've been, taught how to integrate IT in primary. Now, this September, this has been started on national level as well. But I'm very happy that we started, prepared for the new curriculum changes, and the schools in Lithuania in Vilnius, were not scared of the changes. This is Vilnius in Minecraft. And we actually have about 20 or 30 classrooms in Vilnius in primary school that are learning inside Minecraft world. We have this world exploration lesson. So, for example, they learn about, they walk around the different terrains, or, for example, have Žalgiris battle. And they play it out, and they're very happy about that. Usually they also teach teachers somehow how to use it. So it's a very nice flip around for the teachers to also know that their kids know sometimes more than they. But it's a very, very fun thing that children are very interested in. One step further that sometimes is even less known, esports, that's competitive video games. We are piloting that in one specific school in Vilnius, which has kids, well, teenagers who drop out of other schools. So that means these kids are very unmotivated. They don't want to learn. They don't come to school. They have different kind of behavioral issues. And we provided them professional esports player and a psychologist to attract them to school, to learn through the thing that they find very interesting, things like strategy, team building, setting goals, being able to lose and not to start, misbehaving, let's say so. And those kids, they're saying, I'm coming to school because of this lesson. So we're trying this out, and we're very happy with the results so far as well. Another thing, I'm finishing here because there's a lot of things before the big project, phenomenon-based learning. That is part of learning of connecting all of the subjects together. So let's say a school chooses water as a phenomena, and that means that throughout this semester, teachers from different subjects, mathematics, chemistry, music, anything, they all come for at least a few lessons to study water. In that way, students start to understand the world the way we actually do understand the world. Not by, you see the door and you feel like, that's probably technology, I don't know, right? You see subjects as part of the world. They're not inside each subject. So we tried this with 10 schools in Vilnius. I'm quite happy that it's not all schools, because the same way as private schools, that they have certain specialities. That some schools choose one approach, others choose other approach. I think that's the way how public schools should also work. You would know that they're strong in basic subjects, but they also have their own specialities of how they teach different pedagogical approaches. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about the big project that everyone usually asks about. So you probably know Mike Bloomberg and his philanthropies. And once in 3-4 years, they announced Mayor's Challenge around the world. And 3 years ago, they announced the Mayor's Challenge, and more than 600 cities applied from about 100 countries around the world. 50 were shortlisted. It was a long process. Then for 4 months, we were making our proposals better and piloting. And then 15 cities were chosen. Each of them won $1 million for their ideas. The ideas were from unemployment to water shortages, anything. So it's not education, it could be anything. But Vilnius submitted, they only won their education idea, and also was among those 15 winners around the world. And the idea we came with is Vilnius is a school. That's our logo. And basically the idea says that anything can be a learning place. Whether, sorry if it's in Lithuanian, but basically it says, let's say, bank is a school, or street is a school, and so on, right? Anything can be a school, any institution can be a school. And why we think it matters? Because world is changing really fast, and textbooks, for example, changed only once in 10 years, let's say, right? So if Vilnius is blooming with new IT and lasers and technology achievements, you can probably not hear about that inside the school, but it's so easy to go outside and learn about this. So going outside of the school is one way to actually learn about the world. Basically what we decided to do this very easy to use platform. We sometimes say like Airbnb or Netflix of lessons. That would be very easy for teachers who definitely have what else to do in life, to use, and that way help them to go outside. And this is how the platform looks. Any of you can go to Vilnius, well, in Lithuanian, so it's in Lithuanian, but basically it has lessons Every teacher can register on the platform. It has subjects so that it will be very easy to choose. And then each lesson, so I'll just give examples because it will be easier. This is the most popular lesson, which was done by Vilnius Waste Administration System. It's called Waste Basketball because, of course, basketball. And it's for primary school children. And you can see time slots down there. So basically what we decided to do that a teacher just chooses the time that is useful for them. So one click button, then they click another one saying that I'm coming with 24 kids and reserve, and that's it. And a company just puts the time slots that are useful for them. So, you know, you don't have to contact anyone, you don't have to call anyone, you just find all the lessons, you choose the time slot that is useful for you, and you reserve a spot. And you see for which class it is, where it happens, and you just come with the class. And for example, the waste management system, they said, we used to have these lessons because we try to, you know, enlighten the society about sorting rubbish, but it was very hard to find kids. And now they already did like 40 or 50 of those lessons, and they plan to just do more and more. But for example, a private company that works with AI decided to do 12 grade mathematics about how functions relate to AI. And that is something I would have wanted to know as I was in school. And we also really want to connect these lessons to curriculum, because we do understand that teachers often say, but we still have to go through curriculum. So if a company comes to us and they're like, we want to provide a lesson, we have consultant teachers who will help them to find where the things they are doing relate to curriculum. And that way we will write down the competencies that you're going to learn, what is the purpose of the lesson, and where it belongs in the curriculum, so that teachers really feel why they're going outside there. Or for example, if you're a company or institution that maybe doesn't have the time to themselves give out the lesson, you can just provide your space. So that way we have very interesting spaces for teachers to use inside the city, like Lukiškės prison, which is a very interesting space that, again, as a teacher, you can just reserve a spot and go there to give a lesson. And also another option.
Can you give a quick comment on what Lukiškės prison is?
Oh, sorry. It used to be a prison, right? And now it's kind of a cultural hub. There's a lot of things happening, from concerts to different artists residing there. But it's it's used to be a real prison, so it's quite a scary place to go for many people. Yeah, and also another option on the platform is also for teachers themselves to just provide a lesson. That is, if you're going outside as a teacher, you can just upload your lesson plan for other teachers to use. And we pay for that because we do understand that sharing your knowledge not always works so easily. So we pay for this. And, it even connects today with what we heard, because we have, let's say, Jewish Vilnius as one of the lesson plans. Because, of course, you might have a little bit about that in the textbook. But if you're in Vilnius, shouldn't you just go outside and walk through all of those places that are just next to your school, right? So this is what we want to be happening. And this is one I really, proud of. This is happening in the real courtroom by the real judge. Children are judging Hamlet. So this is literature lesson, and they have each role of characters in Hamlet, and an actual judge was, ordering them around, and the teacher after the lesson, she was like, I can't recognize my children. None of them even used the phone over the class. They were all silent. They were very scared, and they were actually involved inside the lesson. So this was one of the lessons that are on the platform as well. So basically the idea is to invite everyone to become part of better education system, and we still are trying to involve more and more different subjects into this, but we believe that that's one of the ways how we can change the educational system. And this idea, the implementation of the idea, just 2 weeks ago we won the best education digital innovation in Lithuania this year, and now we're trying to go to the world award system. We will see how that works for us. So basically what I was trying to do and what I was thinking of is that Vilnius, on one hand, I hope in a few years' time, we'll see more and more of a city of education innovation, place for education innovation, but it's also as a place of a school itself, right? So there's two ways of how I see Vilnius as a place for education. There's a learning space in itself, and it's also a place for different innovations. So thank you.
Thank you very much for these fascinating presentations. Three different angles, three fascinating horizons, one topic. And I already see a couple of questions. So the lady here had a question first, and then
Yes, oh, I probably can speak loud enough without this. Dr. Kunitz, I'm unsure how to say your name. Can you pronounce it, please?
Kuznets.
Kuznets. I happen to be Catholic. A lot of my family is Jewish. And I'll try not to get too emotional, but Jews have been forced to give up their homeland, to move, and they carry the education with them. My grandmother came from Lithuania. There was no food around 1900. So can you please educate me of the time period you're talking about? How did the other people in Lithuania get along with the Jewish population? Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I mean, that's a very large question. You know, first of all, I covered quite a large time span, you know, in my talk. And of course, it's a very, you know, it's a very broad, you know, question, and there are other people here who have done more research specifically on that, you know, on that question. So I'm really not sure how to address, you know, it's such a complicated question. I really feel like it deserves a nuanced and full answer. I'm not sure how to really address it in the short time that we, you know, that we have.
I suppose complex.
Yeah.
Is in a way that,
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, were people respectful of other people's religions then? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, we've heard different scholars address this from different angles and different periods, you know, and I think there's been as we know, there's been a long history of coexistence and diversity in the city, which has been stressed. There's also been periods of conflict, you know, by the you know, I in my own work, I focus on the interwar period. So I, you know, sort of stress that a little bit more. In the wake of the First World War, there was conflict, you know, over the political status of the city and among various, you know, various groups of different religious as well as different national backgrounds. And then there was a kind of coexistence that developed in the 1920s, but by the 1930s, there was rising violence against Jews, and you know, the situation deteriorated somewhat. So I think it's you know, it's complicated, and it depends on the period and the particular particular ruling power as well, and the nature of the ruling regime and the kind of constellation of these various groups that have sought coexistence in the city. So, you know, perhaps we can talk more about it during the break. I don't want to spend the whole period we have trying to unpack this, you know, complicated topic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, simple question to you. How many schools you have in Lithuania? How many teachers are working there? And could I add just one short thing, trying to answer also this question as a person who lives in Vilnius. It depends on the cultural level of communicative person. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vilnius or Lithuania?
I live in Lithuania.
No, but you ask about how many schools and
Schools and teachers.
in Vilnius or in
No,
Lithuania?
in Lithuania.
In Lithuania, you know, because I know definitely Vilnius numbers, I don't want to, but more or less, I would say, so in Vilnius, we have about 7,000 teachers, in Lithuania, about 32,000, something around that. And in Vilnius, we have about 80,000 children now, which is from this September, a quarter of Lithuanians' children in schools. And again, in Vilnius, we have about 160 schools in Lithuania. I don't want to be, because they were, closing down in the regions, but maybe about 800 because they're smaller than in Vilnius, something around that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? I see that in the
Thank you very much. I'm Sam Kramer, PhD student at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. I have a question to all three of you, since you're all educators in one form or another, but particularly for the last speaker, since you're involved in Vilnius's education system right now. Since I noticed in your presentation, there were a lot of online digital initiatives, particularly since the pandemic. Has that process increased? Or would you say that a lot of these initiatives existed before and they were a foundation that allowed Vilnius to get through the pandemic education-wise? Thank you.
That's a very good question, and it kind of extends an idea of Vilnius as a space beyond space, as in Yiddish as a country, and then Vilnius being the capital of that cultural country.
I would say we don't have that many. We have digital solutions, but even, for example, Vilnius is a school project, right? The platform is only a tool to go outside. But everything and all of the learning happens inside real world, no video format. During the pandemic, there were projects to provide online lessons to teach teachers how to use platforms. So that was happening, but we definitely see that even teacher training, some teachers sometimes want to have it online because it's just quicker. You don't have to move through the traffic jams, but in general, people want to be live, they want to meet, and that also what research shows, meeting other people is the best way of learning. So even if we use technology, we also say it's for the purpose, but at the end of the day what matters is people interacting.
Thank you.
Just a quick answer. European Humanities University is now developing a platform that will be offering online education together with a number of NGOs from Belarus who are in exile in Lithuania and Poland, to access people in Belarus who've been deprived of proper education, and to offer in a safe way through VPNs and other safety measures, safety access to the modern online content. We built on not LMS but on LXP, so learning experience-based platform, so that the learning outcomes there would be comparable to face-to-face offline education. So that's a project that we're developing right now with the European Union grant, large grant, and it's much easier than before because of the post-COVID experience, and people have got used to this format of learning.
Well, just very briefly, in my own teaching at Bard College, there's a strong emphasis on in-person teaching, and I agree, that this is the ideal situation, but I would just briefly comment that for a field like Yiddish studies, where it's a small field, but the interest is literally around the world, that tools like online classes have been a real boon to be able to connect teachers and students from all over the globe, really, that for people who don't have the possibility of a face-to-face class. And I think that, it's interesting to think about that as a widely dispersed minority culture like Yiddish culture in relation to the discussion of exile and refugee populations, on the move and existing over wide physical territories.
Okay. And then.
Thank you. I have a question for Cecil Kuznets. Last year I read a very powerful book. It was a memoir by Ellen Cassidy. Her experiences learning Yiddish in Vilna, and then combining that with her growing realization of what happened to those Jewish populations. So my question is this a possibility for the future for Yiddish to be more taught in Vilnius to quiet and for more students to come. I know that's outside of your range, but it seems it ties in with the whole theme here of not only this panel, but of the conference.
Yeah, I have a question to Dr. Kuznets as well. There is a common view that the two most creative Yiddish subcultures were located in Vilnius in Kiev, not say in Warsaw, Krakow, or Riga. Can you say a few words from your perspective, the education system in this city, why it was that way? And I have a question to Dr. Rybinski as well. You mentioned that this view that being in Vilnius strengthens the Belarusian identity. Can you mention some research done on Belarusian traditional culture in your at your university? Thank you.
Yes, so to take the second question first, yeah, there have been many centers of Jewish culture and Yiddish culture, which I emphasized in my talk, in the region, but one could, definitely point to Vilna as well as Kiev as centers that have been particularly active and fruitful in different periods of time. And I think it's, again, the multicultural, multilingual nature of these settings. So for example, Warsaw, well, all right, let's leave Warsaw out of it for a minute, not to get ahead of myself. But when an independent Ukraine was briefly established in the wake of the First World War, it had 4 national languages. And Professor Rybinski mentioned, EHU operating, with so many official languages, and one of those languages was Yiddish. So I mean, this was a short-lived experiment, this independent Ukraine. Around the period of the end of the First World War, but it speaks to this kind of diversity, right, which has traditionally, which also existed in Vilnius, right, which has traditionally been a positive setting for the flourishing of Jewish culture. And then to address the other question. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question, the place of Jewish culture in contemporary Vilnius and education about Jewish culture. There was an institute for Yiddish specifically at Vilnius University for many years, which sadly has pretty much shut down. But I understand that there are, other opportunities for students to learn Yiddish, partly through this online initiatives, which gives students much greater access to classes and teachers. And there are some new projects in the works, so hopefully that will, the Jewish culture will be recognized as an important part of the contemporary educational landscape in the city, and that there will be new ways to incorporate that, as there have been some in recent decades. Okay.
Let me add to this that we are now in the process of accrediting Jewish Studies program at the EHU. So if that goes successful, then in October next year we start a master level program Jewish Studies, and we talked to Jonathan at EVO in New York yesterday. We talked yesterday also the professor to be part that we cooperate on this. So there's a chance that we have a full-fledged, master program of Jewish Studies at Vilnius University next year. So part of that, of course, will be teaching Yiddish. So we hope that will happen, and that's important. So far, there's no such program in Vilnius. So that could be an important innovation in educational landscape. There are many research projects that are related to cultivating, preserving Belarusian identity. The cultural projects, including Jewish heritage, but maybe I should ask Vera to have more examples about such projects, because your institutional memory is much longer than mine, so you can.
I could mention one project that was like a festival of Belarusian culture, and it was managed like a game, like a computer game about different parts of identity, of Belarusian identity. It was actually a student project of a master student in last summer in Vilnius. But there are many of such projects.
About 1/3 of bachelor and master level theses are focused on Belarus, including cultural heritage. So it's about 1/3 of all projects, the fine art student projects at our university.
Yeah, hello. I have a question to Una about this. I work in Estonia at University of Tartu, and often is this question whether University of Tartu is like if it's a little realm in itself, or how much it is part of Tartu, and also how much like university education, what kind of interrelationship it has also with school education. And I teach some courses we call it the junior academy, so I teach also online courses for high school students, but not in Tartu, but in general. So I was going to ask about this interrelationship with, like, when you think of Vilnius as this kind of like a one educational landscape, and like in terms of schools, but like what is the role, how does this higher education institutions figure in that picture from your work's perspective? Thank you.
And this will be our last question.
So of course, because we're a municipality-based institution and universities are national level, we don't work maybe so closely with them, but we do have partnerships, especially in terms of teacher education. And also the project I talked about Vilnius as a school. Universities are joining very actively. Vilnius University just this September started again, I would probably have to say, Children University, and they also joined our platform with the different faculties. And Vilnius Technical University now also have joined, and others. So really, universities have joined because they do understand that they can provide lessons to younger children as well, and that's a way to attract them. And probably even extending to the previous question, even now the curriculum allows up to 30%, let's say, for the school to choose themselves how they use the curriculum time. So many, the most important education documents talk about localization, and UNESCO, others. So I really believe that a place where you are, location, has to be integrated. That's the, extending back to the question before about, how you should learn about the things that are happening inside your place. So I do hope that higher education becomes also a very integrated part of learning about the general education and all of the things that are happening inside the city.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentations and your questions. To conclude, I would like to suggest that Vilnius is a wonderful place to learn precisely because of its complexity. So, it's a great place, but we fund infrastructure more than people. Yes, we have a beautiful Jewish tradition, but there's historical complexity. Yes, we have linguistic plurality, but some languages, how do we deal with that? This situation, yes, but is the best situation to learn. So thank you again for your presentations, and thank you, Bradley and Maximus, for organizing this. And we will conclude this panel now. Thank you.